Hello, and welcome to the Old Farm Bus Podcast. This is the back of the bus session. Hello, and welcome to the Old Farm Bus Back of the Bus Sessions podcast. Today, I've got a new mate here. Is a mate of a mate of a mate. Owen, thank you for setting this up. I really appreciate it. I've got David Eames.
Well, hello.
Yes. You've got a lovely voice, mate.
Oh, thank you.
Have you ever done podcasts before?
No, this is absolutely my first time.
Literally the first one.
I am the podcast virgin today.
Yeah. Popping the cherry. And you've never done an audio book or anything?
No, listened to quite a few, but yeah, never done one.
I feel like we've got discussions to have after this because I want to use your voice for whatever I can.
Okay.
And for the website, I think I just want a really nice, smooth David Eames themed voice going in the background.
Okay.
Can I pay you for that voiceover?
Well, I'm always happy to be paid.
Now, David, when Owen came on, which is about 3 or 4 guests ago, and I love Owen.
Yeah.
We met because I basically was used in a film for, do you know Sam Lennox?
Yeah.
Very good friend of Sam Lennox. And when he did a film years and years and years and years ago, I was Owen's brother in the film.
Right.
And I was used as the fat kid.
Okay.
I was the fat kid that Owen had to bully, hit with a baseball bat, and call horrifying names.
Right.
So, yeah, that's Owen.
Yeah, he wouldn't be playing the fat kid in those days.
Oh, Owen wasn't. He was my brother, and he was beating me up all the time. Have you ever watched that film that Owen played?
No.
I think I've got a copy here, so I'll send it back with you, because
Cool.
them days were probably, again, that feeling of being special. I've never had that before. But, I get to take time off school, and I get to be in a film. It was so incredible to me. And because they had to treat me horribly in the film,
Yeah.
outside of shots, they were so lovely and proper big brothers to me. So ever since then, we've become really good friends. And anything Owen says, it just resonates with most things Owen says. Resonate with me, the MMA side of things. But then when we get into the mental health talk, he said he's learnt so much from you. And I just, after the podcast, because I listen to them back, I like to sort of see my performance and take note, learn from it. But your name, I noticed, kept coming up quite a lot.
Right.
So I got in touch with Owen and said, this David character, who is he? Because he's a mythical figure to me, but I want to know more about him. So could you just take me on a bit of a journey? Who you are, tell us, the audience, what you do now, how long you've been doing that for, and then I want to sort of go into how you got there.
Okay.
So yeah, what do you do now, and what's your job?
A counsellor, quite simply, private practice. Now only working online. Used to have an office before COVID hit. Didn't really believe in online work, but I found actually it's really good. And
What do you use, Zoom?
yeah, mostly. Some clients prefer WhatsApp, but Zoom mostly. And I found that it doesn't get in the way of the work at all. And also, it's much more convenient for clients. You know, they don't have the travelling to and from the office. So I've been doing that now between 15 and 20 years. I can't remember to be exactly.
That's incredible.
And been doing it full time for 7 years now. I used to do it part time before. So when I met Owen, I signed on at Egg, the bank, for the plan was to be there for a month, and I think I was there for 9 years.
9 years.
Yeah. So yeah, I was just going to launch in the private practice, trying to get that underway, and that was just to sort of pay the bills a bit. Well, I stuck there a bit.
A question that popped up there is, what's the difference between a counsellor, a therapist, and a psychiatrist?
Well, it's counsellor and therapist are a bit interchangeable. Okay, so I think of myself as a therapist as well as a counsellor, and I talk to my clients about being in therapy. But there are some people who are very sort of constrained by their theoretical orientation, and they will insist that therapist is something that only applies to people who've trained in a sort of psychodynamic, that is a kind of a Freudian or post-Freudian way. And psychiatrists are more medically based, shall we say.
Okay. And you went off your own back. You just decided, this is what I want to do. I want to help people conquer their minds or regain their mind.
Well, it kind of happened accidentally. Going back a few years, I was doing a bit of volunteering work in prisons.
Wow, okay.
And I was helping to run occasionally a course on restorative justice in prison. And I thought I maybe had a future of working in prison, and I did a counselling course, a counselling skills course to support that.
Right.
And then kind of got hooked. Thought, wow, this is the thing.
You found your flow.
Yeah, I just really loved it, and that connecting with people. And I tell you what I really love about the work is that I've done quite a few things. As I just spoke to you before we started the cast, that I'm quite geeky, electronics engineer, working in software, stuff like that, which I quite enjoyed. Intellectually satisfying work to do, solving puzzles. But I always knew I could get to a solution. With people, not so much.
That's penny dropped moment for me there, because when you look at IT, you think their brains work in this they do work in a formula kind of way, an intellectual solving puzzles. So I always find them very far adrift from being able to help people with their mind, because you imagine that needs more of I don't want to say fluffy, but wholesome element towards it. But you saying there, that's really helped me, because I can listen to them, piece the jigsaw together and start to work out where they might be missing or going wrong. And I suppose a lot of people that want to help people might be over fluffy and over wholesome and just trying to nurture in nature, where it might need that, let's intellectualize this a little bit. Let's take this a 40,000 step back and look at what you're actually saying.
Yeah, well, I feel like I can use my whole self in the work that I do now. So it's the emotional connection with people, trying to empathise and feel what they're feeling. But at the same time, thinking about it, being able to point out contradictions sometimes, to offer alternative ways of thinking about things.
I went on a self-help course recently, or self-development, sorry, in Liverpool, because I had a guy on this podcast, Paul Cope, and he's got a book out called How to Solve All Life's Problems. I thought, this guy's a joker. And then I spoke to him and I thought, oh, he actually can do it. he's got an equation. He's sorted it out. And Paul, because we had such a good podcast, he's always done the online stuff, but he wants to start doing courses. So he did a little trial course with us, and he invited us along for free, which was really lovely of him. And it was sort of 6 people. And my ego self felt, oh, I'm going to be there because we had a great connection, so he just wants me to help everyone else, give the room nice energy, and ask lots of questions. What actually happened was me getting my arse handed to me, or seeing all my contradictions in what I'd said, and going down this brand new path. But it's opened up so much of these doors for me. I'm the happiest version of myself I've ever been. And this is only from 3 weeks ago. But he previously was a lawyer. He set up a law firm. And again, the way that he can go through ancient information, who does the shadows? Carl Jung.
The shadow self.
Yeah, the shadow self.
Yeah.
Carl Jung, I think, is basically
who was a sexist, racist asshole, by the way.
Don't worry, we won't go all there. But what he's done is just take an amalgamation and parts of the good parts, hopefully, of so many different people, and then infuse them into his own thing. But being able to use that lawyer's brain of cross-referencing and finding out the best bits of information and then refuting the bits that don't work. I think that's what's making him so successful as well, and why it works.
Yeah. But I think the thing is that as time's gone by, I've tried to do less and less in a way, because I realise I can't fix anyone. So the intellectual component, the logical part, is only a very small part of it.
Right.
The real work is done through the relationship. Okay, and the experience that people are going to have of of having a relationship. See, the therapeutic relationship's unique. There's nothing else like it because it's a relationship that the client can never get wrong.
Mm.
I often say to my clients that the only person that can make a mistake is me. They cannot get it wrong because I guarantee to accept them unconditionally.
Huh.
That makes me sound like a saint. I tell you, I am absolutely not a saint at all. Like on the road, everybody's a knobhead. I can objectify with the best of them. Okay, but when people tell you who they are, when they share that with you, when you get to their truth, and you understand where they've come from, the things that have shaped the way they are, then you can't judge people.
Mm.
And then the work that I do becomes an immense privilege to do.
Mm.
Because I work with people, most of my clients now are longer term clients. My longest term client, we've worked for more than 16 years together.
Wow.
And it's a special kind of relationship. For some clients, it might be just half a dozen sessions, particularly for, people at the younger end that are more used to change. But some people have very complex lives, and it gets more towards that American model of someone being in therapy and having a therapist as someone to go to that helps, that makes life work better. So I'm not seeing the therapeutic process as being reparative or repairing stuff. It's transformative.
Mm.
And what I'm hoping to do is help people to become their best selves.
Mm. Can we go into the origin story of you a little then? Because the existential, the philosophy, philosophic, say it for me, philosophy, philosophical side to your nature. Did you always take to that? Have you, as a young child, asked the big questions, had a curious mind, and put why to everything? Did the parents get a bit, shut up, with you? What were you like as a kid?
A bit annoying, interested, a bit cocky, sure of myself. I read a Sherlock Holmes story when I was quite young, and he was described in that as a polymath. And I thought, I don't know what that word means. I looked it up, and he said, that's somebody who knows everything. I thought, that'll do.
A polymath.
A polymath, yeah.
I like that, okay.
Yeah. And I guess I'm interested in stuff, and not just, in a narrow confine. So art, literature, science, it's all interesting. The more time has gone by, the more interested I am in social science and social history and how people are. I don't think any knowledge is valueless.
No.
And you don't know when it's going to come in handy either.
Somebody said recently, like, when you're having a discussion, always try and find the truth in what they're saying. I thought that was quite beautiful. So same with when you're looking at art, music, for yourself, look at the truth in it. Look at the part that you can take away with you. So literally any book now, I could read in happiness, just trying to find out the nugget and the gem within it.
Yeah. So there's no such thing as high culture and low culture. There's just culture. And it's like a wine. A good wine is one you enjoy. You don't need a critic to tell you it's a good wine. If it tastes good, it's good. That's it. That's the only criteria. And with music or drama or literature, and we can call anything literature, that if you like it, it's good.
Yeah. That's so true.
Yeah. And people want to tell other people all the time, well, you should like this, you should like that. Well, why?
I think that's a part of people's problems are comparing to the next and always looking at, well, what do they like? Okay, I like that, rather than reaching inside and feeling this does resonate with me. Is that a big part of what you experience?
Yeah, it's again, often people are just busy living their lives, and I try and promote the idea of thinking about it a bit more. That sort of existential approach is about dealing with certain givens that are inescapable. The fact of our own mortality, our isolation from one another, the fact that life is essentially meaningless, the universe doesn't supply us with meaning, and that we have freedom, that everything we do, we choose to do. And those four things mesh together. They're a simplistic way of looking at the world, but it's a way of maybe trying to understand how we operate in the world. So you take, for instance, mortality. It's a scary thing to think about. But having an awareness of it makes us value our lives more.
Mm.
If you've only got a limited amount of money, you're going to be careful how you spend it.
So use your thoughts wisely. Because, again, there's Eckhart Tolle, I'm sure you may have heard on your travels. He has the book Power of Now.
Uh-huh.
A lot of people live in the moment. It's sort of nice to see painted up places, live in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of Buddhist philosophy trying to empty the mind.
Mm.
But you're nuanced in that, where you're saying use your thoughts wisely, be able to clock in with yourself, and then when you can ask the right questions and start living on the right path, then your mind starts to free itself. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, it's using that, if you like, that understanding of the purpose of being in the moment. So it's not just doing it, but knowing why you're doing it. And so to just, I mean, for me, a special thing is my wife and I taking the dog for a walk. We'll go to Kedleston Park quite often, and we'll just sit on a bench for half an hour and just feel the place.
It's big.
Yeah. And the dog's loving it, and then just walking the dog's not just a chore, it's something the dog enjoys it. I try and see it from the dog's point of view. You know.
There is a beautiful picture on social media where you've got a man walking a dog, and they've both got mind bubbles coming out, and the man's has got his money, his job, all these different things going around, and the dog's mind bubble is just what's in front of it. And I thought, oh, that's really lovely. So yeah, sometimes just getting into the dog's mindset of what's that thinking about. It's just, where's the next stick? I'm so excited and just happy to be here.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Dog's philosophy could be summed up as, this is brilliant.
Yeah. So true. I really love dogs, and that is why they do put me in that mindset. When I'm with a dog and we're just playing, I've joined its fun.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, you plonker, you should have just been doing this as much as you could.
But if you've got a dog, then you also have the awareness that they're not going to be around for very long. So that's a way to enjoy their company even more. So, trying to think, it's about 18 years ago now, our old dog, Dew, he was a golden retriever, died. He was age 13, and it absolutely broke me. I'm going through a difficult time in my life for various reasons, and he was like my main friend, and the loss of him, I thought, I cannot go through that again. So we didn't have a dog for 12 years. And then we got a dog, and then I realised I've been an idiot for 12 years. Because grief is the price of love.
Yeah.
You can't have love without grief. You lose everything, or they lose you. That's the only way it works.
So you're living in fear of not having to go through that again, and as soon as you navigate to living in a fear-based side of your nature, you're always going to be on the wrong track.
Yeah.
And live through love.
Yeah, you everything you have that's of value, then there's a risk of losing it.
Yes.
Sometimes there's a certainty of losing it.
Yeah. Wow.
But where does the value come from? So, there are a lot of people that can get quite cut off. They struggle to. There's something called an avoidant attachment style, where people really don't want to get too close in relationships, and if it gets close, it feels dangerous for them. So they pull back, but they're missing out on so much. Because if you take the risk away, you take the reward away too.
I think we're fine now. Podcast done. That was all I needed to hear. That was stunning. Mate, I'm enjoying this. This is how I operate, and these conversations, I love powerful pieces of truth, and I make snippets, and that's definitely going to be one. Why are humans so complex? You can take us in the whole evolution of the brain if you must. The Stone Age theory.
Yeah, don't give me a hard test.
Do you know much about the brain's development, and why we become overthinkers and detached from our animalistic nature?
Well, we are detached from it, but we're not. If we say we're detached from that animal nature, actually we're in denial about it. So anyone who claims to be a rational person is delusional. We are never rational. Nothing we do is rational. Because the whole thing... I listened to a podcast recently, a guy who was a physicist who used to write for Star Trek The Next Generation. And he talked about the character Data in that, who's an android who says he's got no emotions at all and all he wants to do is be more human. Well, the very fact of wanting to be more human is an emotion.
Yes.
So there's a basic contradiction in the character, because if he was truly unemotional, he'd just sit there waiting to be told what to do. So emotion drives it. So work that's been done with people who've suffered brain injuries where they've lost the ability to feel emotion, you'd think they'd become hyper-rational, decisive people. The opposite of the case, they're paralysed. They can't decide what to have for breakfast. Because how do you choose? Without the emotional weight of something, how do you choose anything? And everything we do is irrational. So you watch TV, unless it's educational, if it's a drama, why would you do that? Not eating anything beyond kibble, spending money on tasty foods, why would you do that? Having a drink of alcohol, why would you poison yourself? Well, it's fun, but fun is irrational. So here's an idea that the pursuit of pleasure is a rational thing to say you want to do, but the pleasure itself is irrational. It's emotional. Now, our brains, I mean, they're the most complex thing we know of in the universe, okay? But they have developed in a continuous evolutionary process. And the previous versions weren't demolished and then started anew, so we've got all that old lizard stuff at the back there.
What's that called?
Well, I mean, you've got, the limbic system,
Yeah.
and those, the hind brain and the midbrain, and then you've got the cortex on top, which is the more developed type. But a lot of that other stuff is still running the show a lot of the time. It drives a lot of our anxieties and a lot of our behaviour, and reasonably so. So there's our fear detection systems, and this drives a lot of anxiety. They work on the basis of overriding your conscious decision-making process. So those people in Africa 100,000 years ago, if there's a lion prowling around, if they're having to think about what they're going to do next, they are not your ancestors. Your ancestors ran away or picked up a spear and fought back without thinking about it, because their animal nature drove them. Now, that sort of thing still works on our brains today, but it's not necessarily appropriate in a modern urban setting. And so if we've felt anxiety in a particular situation in the past, then our brain thinks, well, there might have been a danger there, I'd better be ready for danger again. So I'm going to fire up the response system of fight or flight.
So is a big part of our problems we're trying to repress this side of our brain as soon as it's doing its natural move away from that situation, and it's sort of telling you the signals of what you need to be doing. We're trying to rationalize it all the time and fight against it.
Yeah, and if we're in denial about it, then we're not able to get any control over it at all. So a lot of quite a few neuroscientists nowadays would argue that there's no such thing as free will.
I've heard this discussion being...
Yeah, they talk about something called the cognitive narrator, who's basically looking at our instinctive behaviour, then coming up with a story to explain it.
Wow.
It's like you've got a commentator there in the background, but it's not actually running the show.
Wow.
And some of the time, that's definitely true. You must have experiences of you've done something which you absolutely didn't want to do, or not done something that you did want to do. Maybe there's a task that keeps hanging about, and you find yourself, you've always forgotten to do it. Although it needs to do, it's because your brain kind of switches it off, because there's something else you'd rather do instead. Something called present bias, for instance. So something that gives you pleasure in the present rather than in the future, you're more likely to do.
See, the one thing I've implemented in my life at the minute is I've given myself loads of different characters, and I've named each of these characters. And the way we've gone through it is I've needed these needs to be met. These are sort of natural needs, which is control situation, variability of situations, feeling of being special, and love and connection. And one character that you mentioned then that's always, this is how I sort of understand it anyway. I've got Billy, silly Billy, and I always... that's my catastrophe character here. But sometimes I forget things, more often than not. And my job being a filmmaker, if I can forget one thing, that's the end of the day.
Yeah.
And one job I went to Chatsworth House and I was filming an Olympian horse rider. Billy Big Bollocks. I've got my thing together. And then I unpacked everything. Didn't take the SD cards with me.
All right.
But it's fine. Didn't take the SD cards. And I beat myself up. You're having a boxing match over there.
Sorry, I do apologise.
I beat myself up all the time about this part of my character. But he's actually getting these needs met, this character. So it's not my genuine self, but did I actually want the job? Did I really want to be there filming an Olympian horse rider? Or would I really want to be filming a music video for a rapper or whatever speaks my language? So although, yes, I want to sort of please my mum and say, yes, I'll come and do all da-da-da-da. But the fact that I didn't reach for those SD cards in the moment actually showed me something about myself and lost me the job that I just told myself I wanted. But my true, genuine nature. So something in that of what you were saying now I was learning from, and there's some genuine truth there.
Yeah, that may well be the case, but you might have also just forgotten.
Yes. Yeah. I can intellectualize things very much.
Yeah.
But I do feel many times when I've been in situations and panicked and beat myself up because I forgot a certain thing, when I've really reached inside and thought about the job at hand, I don't think my true self was there. I think I'd put myself in them positions because of the validation of, you're really good at this. So I thought, oh, I'll go do that then.
Yeah.
It's not who I really am. It's not where I really wanted to be.
Yeah, we can sabotage ourselves all the time.
Yes.
And there's that thing about whether there really are separate selves. So you mentioned Carl Jung earlier. The one thing that he promoted was the idea of the personae, that he argued that there was no such thing as the core self, that we were just the different actors' masks that we wear in different roles. I don't really agree with that.
I don't agree with that.
Although we do play differently in different situations.
See, I'll just explain this one a bit more, is you have all these different characters. I think I've wrote down like 40 now, but they've all ended up meeting my needs in unhealthy ways. And I, at one stage in my life, hated them. But now I've fallen in love with them because I'm like, actually, you were just trying to get these needs met. What I'm going to do is pick apart and take away all them needs and all them parts of you that were trying and then feed them back to my authentic self. So forgetful Mikey was trying to live in the moment. He was trying to just be happy-go-lucky and do that. Okay, that's beautiful side of that person's nature, but the forgetful element, I just need to nurture a bit more and help. So I've brought him back, and then I'm finding so much about myself through this sort of NLP, I suppose it is, or it's just a different approach. And it's completely shaped what do I actually want in my life now, because I'm going back and thinking of all the situations I put myself, even the buses to an extent, and going into schools and doing talks and everything. I've realigned, and an unhealthy side of my nature is being met there. But it doesn't just have to be eradicated. It's just sitting back and going, okay, what do you like and what don't you like about it, and feeding back into that. It's been a crazy destination. But yeah, from that Carl Jung, I went to a men's talk recently, and there was lots of it that it didn't suit me. But I think some of the ideas and elements are in this new practice. Do you have a sort of a niche in your practice? Is it?
What do you mean by niche?
A niche being, have you taken away from all different practices on your timeline that you've learnt from all the different books, philosophies, religions maybe, and then you'd honed into seemed to be what works best?
The approach I have, technically called, is an integrative approach. So there are three broad schools of therapeutic counselling. So you've got the psychodynamic, which is all about the unconscious mind and things like that. Then there's the humanistic approach, which is more about non-interventionist in a way, all about the emotional content, the here and now, not really making any sort of suggestions apart from just containing. And then there's the cognitive approach, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is more about like computer programming. Well, I think they're like different schools of painting. You know, you want to compare a Rembrandt to a Picasso to a David Hockney. When you say which one's better, it's a matter of taste. And they're different ways of expressing things, different ways of exploring what it is to be human. And I think that no one theory contains the complexity of humanity. And different theories at times are going to have different resonances with different people. Yes. So for some people, it's all about the emotional context. For others, it's about the intellectual understanding. So I feel I have to sort of shape my approach depending on what's working.
Yes.
And that sort of knowledge and experience can come from all sorts of sources. So scientific information, what neuroscience is finding out these days, that's just as useful as grand theories came up with by Sigmund Freud. Who was wrong in many things, but let's not discount the enormous influence that he had on the whole idea of talking therapy as a way of. But he thought, that he could think of something and that would become true. But the idea that everything has to be evidence-based now, that's a bit tricky too, because everybody's different. So how do you really compare one person to another? So I think therapy is more art than science.
Oh, that's stunning. That hit me in a nice spot there. Therapy is more art than science. Yeah. I like the saying, what works, works too. And taking it even to nutrition, there's always this sort of online fad and plan. And it goes, if you eat this, 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 and this, you will become this. The complexities of the gut and the complexities of how we digest, operate with different foods, tolerances, intolerance, it's all to be taken into account. And I do worry when people say this size fits all. I think somebody said recently, one size fits one. Yeah. And I thought, oh, that's nice. Yeah. I can work with that. Yeah. But what works, works.
Yeah. So try and look at people in a holistic way. So sleep is something I work with quite a lot with, because you find quite a lot of people have got problems with sleep. So working with different ways of managing their sleep can have a huge impact. It's the single biggest factor in a sense of well-being. Or people's work environment. Some of my clients have got very complex business arrangements. They've got a lot of politics going on in the office, so we might be spending most of our sessions on office politics. But that's what they need to feel they've got some control in their lives. Other people, it's about parenting. Like most mothers that you work with seems to feel that they're failing in some way as a mother, whereas most dads think they're great dads. I don't know where that difference comes from, but I think it's about the expectations placed on women, which are unfair, and they place it on themselves.
Oh, then we're getting into another part of the conversation, isn't it? Sort of societal issues.
Yeah, but then it's about, working with, with someone, hey, being a good enough mother is good enough, has been argued, and don't, not to worry about it.
I think that word that you said then, enough, is one of the biggest factors of mental health. And I genuinely believe most of our problems stem from not feeling enough.
Yeah.
Mikey sat down in his boxes playing Xbox, had always been screamed at and shouted, and needed to know that isn't enough. So every time I'm procrastinating, quote unquote, now, I have a huge anxiety in my stomach, even when I know it doesn't belong, because I've done what I needed to do in the day. I find it really hard to get away from there, because this feeling of not being enough just creeps at me all the time.
Okay, but again, who decides that?
Me.
Yeah.
yeah.
So I love gaming. Owen, the reason we've stayed in touch over the years is Friday night. It was originally Xbox, now on the PlayStation.
No, can I join?
Well, we can interview you for it.
Yeah, I like that.
It's a high bar.
I can imagine it is. He spends a lot of time on it, so I can only picture the levels you play at now.
But I enjoy gaming. I see it as an emergent art form these days. A really good storied game and it's not a waste of time, because I choose to do it and enjoy it. I'm the only person that gets to decide that.
Yeah. And that's, again, stems from not feeling enough, but then another sector or part of our problems come from you've got to take all the responsibility. There's sort of a up till 18 you're excused because you're developing, you're a child, and you've been given all these sort of problems. But at some point you have to go, every single problem I'm facing in my life now is how I've internalized it and how I've digested it and allowed it to sit, and I've avoided or I've not approached it. So it's all you then. And that's a big pill to swallow, isn't it?
Yeah.
That it's yours to take.
Yeah, well, the other side of existential freedom, that idea that we only ever do things that we choose, means that we're also responsible for our actions.
Yes.
When people first started talking about the idea of, well, people can do whatever they like, so, well, that's a recipe for chaos. How's society ever going to work if people can do whatever they like? Well, if they're responsible for the outcome, then surely they're going to behave better, rather than saying, oh, somebody made me do it.
I'm sure there's a Simpsons episode for everything, isn't there? But there's definitely one on this.
Yeah, and it's about that choice that you make. And the other thing is, good mental health is not about always feeling good.
Yes.
It's because
that's good.
You want to be anxious. Like, if I'm driving on a motorway and it's raining and it's busy and I can't see, I want to be scared.
Yeah, just do.
I want to keep my family safe.
Yes.
You know, everything I hold dear might be in that car.
Mate, can I just say, Owen, thank you. I'm really, really happy at the minute. No, this is so helpful, and I really appreciate this.
Yeah. So last night I had a bit of trouble sleeping. The popping my cherry here today, and it was nervous, excitement.
Yeah.
But that's okay, because I didn't see that was being defective. It's normal. If you're doing something, if people are going for an interview or an exam, whenever I meet a new client, I'm nervous because I want to get it right. But that's okay. Anxiety is part of being human. We don't want to eliminate it.
I work for a company called Independent Thinking, and they're the fish that swim the other way in education. And the guy that set up the company is called Gilbert. He's got a book out called The Book of Thunks, and it's philosophy for children. So questions like, what colour's Tuesday? And it makes them think laterally instead of just, here's a question, what's the answer? They've all got their own little unique answers. But the best advice he's ever given me when I used to get scared about performing and speaking was, nerves are the respect that you pay the audience.
Yeah.
I thought, do you know what? That's beautiful because I care. I want what I'm saying next to be the best experience for them that I can give and deliver, because they are going off into their schools and different places with this at hand. So if I don't care ever and get on a stage, I won't put on a performance, and then the energy's not going to be there. Nothing happens next.
Yeah, if the adrenaline's not flowing, you're going to be boring.
Yeah. Definitely. And
I've had... Or Donald Trump,
Yeah, don't want to do that. No. You don't want to go Donald on him.
No. So you use that. It's part of your animal nature, and it's preparing you to do better. It's your friend. Can
we go back to there? Because I know the way my brain works is very sporadic, and I just get so excited by little snippets of conversation you're saying. I dive, and then I'll take us all the way over here. This is what podcasts are for me, though. Sort of questions and answers. They've got a format, but it doesn't suit me. I love the beauty and confusing nature of a pub talk.
Well, that's how my counselling sessions work.
Really?
Because it goes where it goes. There's no plan.
Mate, that's how my heart works. But going back into that animal brain, we got to a certain part of it and sort of free will discussion. I want to talk more about the animal brain and the brain in general, the development, because you are right that there are elements where you do have to start rationalising, though, our sexual nature or so on. We'd have a rape culture if we just did anything and acted in any way we like, and the animal brain and testosterone just got to run the ship. So where'd you go with that? What's your part of how you help people rationalize what the animal brain wants to do all the time.
Well, I guess if you're aware of it, it doesn't have to be running the show. This is the whole thing about the only chance of being rational is accepting our fundamental irrational nature.
Say that again. So
The only way we can be rational is by understanding that we are fundamentally irrational.
lovely. Yeah.
Because then you're asking yourself, okay, what's really going on for me here? So somebody might have said something that's upset you. You think, okay, where's that come from? What was their intention? Why is that provoking that response in me? And often it's about things in the past. It might be connected to things in our past. It might be something that's threatening us, and it's a fight or flight response that's being elucidated. But it's the more we understand our emotional nature, and again, modern neuroscience is advancing this. The traditional view of more complex emotions, not the basic fight-flight ones, but more complex emotions, was that they were located in specific brain areas and that everyone had them, and you'd either choose to express it or suppress it. But the neuroscience nowadays is showing that complex emotions are a whole brain activity, and they are a learnt behaviour. Okay.
Okay.
So the degree of emotional content that a child's exposed to will affect how they can express their emotions in later life. And there's something called granularity, which is the degree of detail of emotion that someone can express.
Wow.
So if you've been exposed to a more complex emotional environment, I don't mean an abusive one, but just one people who are able to express themselves, then the children get a better chance to learn it. Doesn't mean it can't be learnt later, and there's all sorts of things that can teach it. Like drama's a great thing for teaching emotion.
I would just side note, I want to put a drama class on this bus because I love drama, and I did it as a kid, and then just stopped. And obviously, I did that film with Owen and so on, and that was because of my drama days. But I think drama's so important in development and how to feel emotions, showcase emotions, even when it's contrived and you've got to act it. It's sort of that fake it to make it, and you're learning about all these different emotions. I've got a daughter, and I can't wait for her to start drama classes, honestly.
Yeah, literature is a way of finding it. Just having relationships with other people, the more authentic we can be, the more we're going to learn. But there's no normal. Okay, there's another key thing. It's the modern word, and I think it's a great word, is neurodiversity.
Neurodiversity.
Yeah.
I can put the two together and make an idea, extrapolate.
Yeah. So you don't talk about someone being abnormal. Let's say if they're on the autistic spectrum, it's just different.
Different. Yeah.
I remember there was a program on some time ago of Chris Packham, the naturalist, talking about his autism. I don't know if it's Asperger's or autism they got, but certainly on the spectrum. He said he doesn't want to be cured. Because he wouldn't be him anymore.
Yeah.
So why not let's just accept people and not saying... there's a modern tendency to talk about disorders, personality disorders, this, that and the other. And I think that's driven from America, whereas the insurance companies won't pay out unless you can diagnose something. Rather than just saying, hey, somebody's having a bit of a struggle here, let's try and do better.
Here's a question that's bubbling and blossoming from everything you said. Do you think the system, and not to go conspiratorial or go wherever you want with it, is it deployed and built and set up in this very rigid parameter for a reason?
What do you mean by that?
So, the education system, for example, and then on and on and on. If you play up, misbehave, act differently to how the system wants you to operate in quite small, rigid boxes, then you're bad. And then this feeling of not being enough starts to bloom because you keep getting put in different spaces and you don't belong here, you don't belong. And then I just wonder, the ones that suit the system, go into this school, you know how to be asked questions, regurgitate the information, that's how we operate, and then you go on and then you fit as a perfect citizen. I just wonder, is it deployed?
No, I don't think there's any sort of overarching
Just sort of a byproduct. So this is how we've set it up.
It's chaotic. Nobody knows anything, and they're just doing the best. Now, I think education is a lot better than it used to be.
I agree.
I've had some teachers as clients over the years, and see how really difficult their work has been, and the demands put on these days, I think, is almost impossible. And they're striving within. See, the whole thing is you want to measure things, but whenever you try and measure something, it changes it. There's a sort of rule in statistics that once a statistic becomes a target, it ceases to be a statistic, because the very putting a target on it changes the behaviour. But I mean, my old school reports were always, David could do better. He's easily distracted. It never said, "Oh, David's getting bored by you."
Yeah.
They never thought about that aspect of it. It was all down. I mean, many of the things that I've learnt over the years, doing software, electronics, I was largely self-taught. I'm much better at teaching myself than other people teaching me. I like to learn. I like to explore. That's my learning method. That's really hard to work in a school environment, particularly back in the days when I used to be caned on a regular basis.
I bet you would as well, because you'd ask questions, and they don't like that often. They do now.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, they thought I was some kind of mafia boss. Well, I was just a bit challenging. And yeah, I was,
My friend
difficult.
Martin Illingworth, who I go into schools with, he's got a book called Forget School. Very much about what we've been talking about today. He uses this method where is at a school. We made a film together, and there's a kid, and it's not behaving badly and not behaving really good. It's just one of those kids which happen to a lot, where it's very passive experience, and they're just there, and they don't know what's in it for them. And then there's a pivotal moment in the story where the head teacher sees this kid's won a fishing competition with his granddad. And then what they start to do is take that bit of passion and then tell all the different teachers in all the different fields, and they use that passion in all of what they're doing. So the art teacher gets him to start drawing fish, the science teacher looks at the biology of fishes, and you can go into the history of that and everything. And it's taking that individual character and using their thing, their hook, to negate their whole life. And I think that's very special. And again, it does turn it into the individual. What does that need? But imagine that in a system. It's very tricky though. I don't speak in absolutes, because I've worked in schools. We run a night here, and it's blooming hard. It's really tricky to all the different behavioural needs and differences of emotions and so on. They're hard to conduct, but that is it's a beautiful premise. Taking them as an individual again.
Yeah, but there are limited resources.
Yes.
And you work within the constraints of that, and the whole system is always run by human beings, and human beings are fallible in everything they do.
Flawed.
Yeah,
we're all just flawed. We're working from our best, but I suppose that's where I was thinking it's a top-down structure, isn't it? And then it's just been sort of set up to fail for a certain subsector of people, because it doesn't feed that machine of making money, which is what our system, I feel, has been built on. And that doesn't feel conspiratorial to me. It just seems it's like Occam's razor. You say it, so it makes quite a lot of sense.
Well, there's a basic assumption, isn't it, that kids need to get a good education, and the assumption of that is that so they can earn more money, and that's the only objective of education. That's kind of the society that we live in. And yeah, more money makes life easier, but again, enough is enough.
And it's very much living. We spoke about past, and we always live in from our past, but the future too. We're just living in a future. So the system being set up, when you go here, you do well here so that you can go here. And then when you do well here, you do that so that you can go here. And then when you get that job eventually, because you've got to that uni, you're always trying to hit a quota and trying to work your way towards something. And then at the end of it, you go, I feel no different.
Yeah, and I get a number of clients who approach me in sort of midlife saying, "I've done everything I was supposed to do, so why doesn't it feel better?" Yeah, I've got the car and the house and the wife and the kids. So why don't I like it? What does it mean? It's that back to the meaninglessness thing that the universe doesn't supply meaning. It's up to us to find it.
Wow. too many snippets in this podcast. Can we just jump back in as well about the emotions? You mentioned 2 different types of emotions. Could you just, for the audience, talk about the basic ones?
Well, the basic stuff is fight or flight, the things that keep you safe, and also maybe get you laid, because that's one of the basic ones.
So we've got sort of anger, love, fear, grief.
Is love a basic emotion? I'm not sure that it is. I think it's more complex than that.
Love is probably our strongest emotion.
Well, is it?
Well, this is a statement I've just thrown out. I can explore it.
It's the most important one, I think, and it's the most enjoyable one when it works, but it's going to be overridden sometimes by fear.
What I'm going off now is a video I watched. It was 2 minutes, done by a nice Australian accent, but it gave me 5 natural emotions, and it was all about learning these emotions, feeling them instead of repressing them, because it had the natural ones, and if left repressed, they turn unnatural. So fear turned to panic if left repressed. Grief turned to depression if left repressed. Anger turned to rage. Love turned to possessiveness in this video. And I can't remember, there was a 5th. I'll think of the 5th and then I'll pop in.
Shame, would that be one?
It didn't mention shame, no. It was anger, fear, love, grief. Oh, envy.
Okay.
So envy, a natural emotion, makes us want to do well and look at the next person and go, oh, I like that thing. But if left repressed, it turns to jealousy, which becomes really toxic and tries to drag them down. So that was on this video, 5 natural emotions, and made me sort of clock in with myself and go, have I felt these emotions correctly when I've not grieved properly? Am I feeling depressed because of that? And sort of go back in line with it. But yeah, what do you know differently of these natural emotions? It is just fight and flight?
Well, I think that it's because I've said that they're learnt, much of our emotional context. I think sort of sticking labels on things, again, it gets a bit tricky.
Yeah.
And trying to categorise things in that way feels a little bit oversimplistic.
Yes.
Because, envy can drive different things. It might drive ambition as well. And that whole idea about whether things are repressed or not is maybe, not held up by the latest scientific knowledge.
Yeah.
That maybe people don't have the emotions in the same way and feel them in the same way. Interesting. So, it's just like asking somebody, rather than telling somebody, this is what you feel, I want to ask them what they feel. And if they've had not been exposed to complex emotions so much in the past, often the response is, I don't know.
Yes, it's a big response.
Yeah, and I know I feel something, but I don't know what it is. Can't put a word to it, can't articulate it. And we need to have the sort of experience to know what these emotions are and to put words to them. But I'm not in the business of telling anybody what they should be feeling. But I say that's why I see the most basic ones are those that are there to keep us safe or to procreate.
How do you help people feel, though? Because we tell people you need to feel our emotions, or we need to live in the moment, and people put labels and thoughts and ideas out there. But then it's just, well, how do I do that, though? Well,
I can't do anything. That's the whole thing. I can't do anything, but I help to create an environment where my clients can do it for themselves.
Right.
So that experience of being able to talk about stuff without being judged allows that development to take place. The experience of that relationship allows that to happen. It's almost like I'm not. It's a difficult thing about whether people are actually undergoing change. I like to think of it in terms of it's getting rid of the brambles that restrain the real, authentic self. So allowing people to become who they always had the potential to be. No, it's not me changing them. It's about them undergoing their own change in their own way. And what I'm doing is not dragging them forward on that, but walking alongside them on that journey. And that's such a privilege. You know, there are moments where clients have these moments of realization of the change that's taken place for them and how their life is being transformed by that. And it's such a moment to share. And I feel sometimes so proud of them, not of me, of them. You know, wow, you've really come from there. And it's just a moment to share with people. The work I do is such a privilege because I see people in extreme emotional states sometimes, which ordinary life you don't experience very often, and it's just a privilege to be there. And that emotion can be positive as well as negative. But the feeling of it helps people to feel more in the future and get more understanding of it.
I mean, this might, because you're having such long friendships or relationships with your clients, does it become tricky when you've been with them for so long, and maybe in your being able to have a 40,000 foot view of what they're talking about, you kind of want to say it's this, but you're having to let them discover it for themselves?
No, it's not always letting them discover it for themselves. Sometimes I point things out. I can be quite challenging. If there are inconsistencies, I'll point them out. And I think challenge is a big part of the work. But again, it's that recognising that the challenge is not a rejection and it's not a judgment. It's just, hey, this doesn't make sense. Sometimes it's about putting the pieces together and saying, oh, this seems to be like that thing that happened to you that time. Do you think there's a connection here between those events?
That for me is when I know that I've hit a better trajectory with my life, because challenges before used to really rile me up, and now I'm buzzing every time somebody says something that makes me reflect back on myself. I'm like, oh, keep doing that thing, because I'm learning from this. And it's so powerful. As painful as it can feel, it's where the truth lies. It's where you need to go into that pain when you're in this struggle.
Yeah, and because I don't know anything, I might be wrong, and that's okay.
Yes, but you know some things.
Yeah, but how it applies to a particular person at a particular time could be completely wrong.
No, that is true.
So let's put it out there, and it's something to talk about. And
yes,
it might take us nearer to the truth.
Well, and that is it, because that truth there, if somebody can really be able to refute and say, no, this is why this isn't correct, and no, but that isn't that, and it can help them get further affirmed to their answer, that's powerful too. So it's just putting stuff out there that may be of truth, and then suddenly when you start to, I think when you notice it is when anger starts to come to the forefront. It's not that, you go, it might be though. It's a real blockage up.
Yeah. I think in the end, what does the work is authenticity.
Yes.
And that above all, that's the most important thing for me, is wanting to be authentic with people.
Not to go to any depths that you don't wish to go to, but was there any in your own timeline and journey where mastering this or just changing the direction of your life became really important to you, focusing in on the mind?
Yeah, I mean, it's I've been through various disasters in my life, a financial disaster, health problems. I was sort of diagnosed with a potentially terminal illness some years ago, which recovered from.
Brilliant.
That we learn a lot from pain. I learned nothing from good times. I wish I did. All I learn is how to be a bigger dick.
I laughed because it's true, because that's me as well.
Yeah, pain is the best teacher. And during the process of my own therapy of working towards becoming a therapist, realising the issues I had with abandonment. Now, I always felt I was reasonably secure, but I was adopted at the age of 6 weeks, and I didn't. I thought I'd always known I was adopted. I'd never felt I had a problem with it. It was never an issue. Yeah, my parents chose me. You know, I wasn't foisted on them through nature, and I was absolutely cool with that. But I came to realise that if ever I felt that I was being left out of something, excluded anyway, I could have a really quite violent reaction to that, get really angry with it, and concluded in the end that it was about that rupture at the age of 6 weeks. Now, Subsequent to that realisation, I was able to get my birth records, which showed that I'd actually spent the first 6 weeks of my life with my birth mother in a mother and baby home in West Ham. So I'm actually a Cockney by birth. At the same time, I also discovered I was half Irish. I didn't know that before. And I phoned one of my mates up and he said, well, that explains everything.
Yeah.
So,
The wildness begins.
yeah. But but I realised, that was a fundamental rupture that happened to me at the age of 6 weeks. And yet, when I joined my parents, I was like adopted by a whole village because my mother had lost 2 children in childbirth. And it's like the whole village that she lived in, a small community next to a mining community. Their parents were both miners, and the whole village wanted them, for it to work. So I was kind of adopted by everyone.
Wow.
So I went to a really warm environment there. So I had this mix of issues with abandonment, but at the same time being emotionally secure. So the abandonment could just kick in sometimes, and then it was quite destructive for me.
Confusing.
Yeah, and it's something to work through. There's always stuff to work through. We're never a finished article. Trying to understand who you are in the world.
Have you had any recent moments of penny drops or breakthroughs?
It's trying to reframing is a key skill I see increasingly there of how do you see things in a better way. If you can think about things in a way which feels better, kind of why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But I'm not talking about positive thinking as everything's good all the time, because it isn't. Life is sometimes terrible.
Yes.
And if it's good now, it's going to get worse.
Yeah.
But if it's bad now, it may well get better. But in February of 2020, just before the first lockdown kicked in, my wife had a double mastectomy. She'd been diagnosed with cancer over the Christmas period. And we think that was really lucky. Because if she'd not had a scan and it hadn't been found,
Perspective.
she'd have been dead by
Wow.
now. Because either it wouldn't be found in time, or if it would be found, then it would have been in the middle of the lockdown and all that crap that was going on there. So the timing and everything was perfect. And that's something that's been a major event in life recently. But how do you see it in a way which is more positive? Can you view it in that way?
So somebody came on recently, and he works for Alcoholics Anonymous, which I'm nuanced towards. If it works, it works. So I'm happy that he's stopped drinking, and there's certain elements that I'm not 100% sold on. One of the nice things he said is alcoholism is a disease of perception. And I think the same for mental health. It's a disease of perception. It's the way you look at things. And that quote, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. What you've just beautifully articulated then is you managed to find the beauty in the situation. And that's really important for people to, when you've had the worst possible part of your existence happen, because your worst day is your worst day. Everyone's got different thresholds. But if you can look at that and take out parts of it, how awesome can your life actually be from there?
Yeah. How do you find the value in every day? And
always try and balance with it. Even the most incredible thing to ever happen, what's it teaching you? Find the lessons within it.
Yeah, and accept the reality
Yes.
of life. Again, that looking at the terribleness of life.
Yes.
There's that thing of the sort of ancient Persian wisdom where the guy asked his wise men to give him a phrase that would be true under all circumstances, and they went away and thought, and they came back with, "This too shall pass." And that is always true, whether it's good or bad, it will pass.
I always like to take quotes because I do poetry and lyricism, and there's ones where I always try and change them slightly or play with it, and could that be said in a better way? But this too shall pass, and be the change you want to see is another one. I think they just suit that they've been taken out and chunked down to the best optimal way of saying something. That they're the ones that I always stand to. Do you have any sort of sayings that you really go towards?
There's a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah. I like that. There's another one I always say is, you're not who you think you are. You're who you think they think you are.
Well, that's a risk a lot of the time, is that people are pushing their own fears into other people's heads. So their perception of what other people are thinking about them isn't actually what other people are thinking about them.
Stories we tell ourselves.
There's a thing called the spotlight effect, which I work on quite a bit. It's quite helpful when people have got trouble with public speaking.
Oh, come on. Hit me
Wait.
with it.
For each one of us, the universe is divided into the universe and us. You know, there's us and there's everything else. And we're sitting there at the centre of the universe, under a spotlight, completely illuminated, everything visible. And we think, well, everybody else can see that. You know, if I'm going to go and do public speaking and I'm nervous, everybody's going to see that. They're going to see my fear. But they don't, because they're all dazzled by their own spotlight. They're all sitting in their own universes, and research has been done is that people don't actually notice much what's going on with other people.
I did a talk, which very ironically was at a happiness festival. Be happy! And it was one stage with 1,000 people all facing the front, and it was in my very strange sort of, I've told you about before the podcast, psychosis-y days, paranoia. I was still hurtling myself into situations all the time and just saying yes to stuff when actually what I probably needed, it worked, so I got to where I got to. But I went up on this slot, and I had 15 minutes to talk, and within 2, I went into a flashback. So from my psychedelic-y days and so on, I was straight there, and everyone started morphing and looking a certain way. And really what they saw, because I did get through it, and the organiser said, it was great. But in my head afterwards, I beat myself up for months because I thought they were watching me sweat, they were watching me panic, and all the things that I was seeing visually happen in front of me, the hallucination and so on. I imagined they'd all witnessed it.
Yeah.
But really, they just saw a guy just probably having sweaty hands and a bit of a sweaty head and looking around a bit dazed, and that's about it.
Yeah.
But I saw it in a completely different light for a very long time.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah.
So I think this is a nice saying as well, what actually happened, and the emphasis on actually, because we tell ourselves massive stories about this and this and this and that. You break it down and it's very far from other people's perceptions.
Yeah. Can we take a break?
Yes, of course.
I really need a pee.
Yeah, no worries. Of course we can.
It's a cold. I'm sorry. You can edit that, can't
Mate,
you?
of course I can. Yeah, we're rolling. I'm Steven Spielberg.
One semester later.
So we were talking about stories that we tell ourselves
Yeah.
until pit stop.
Yeah.
Another thing that I wanted to mention from that is, if you're in a family and you're seeing somebody that's going through mental health, what is the best advice you could give to them? Because you see it really rips through families. But is there an element where you have to want to change?
Well, there's no gag of how many therapists does it take to change a light bulb? Only one, but the light bulb has to really want to change.
Perfect.
But I don't give advice because advice isn't part of my game.
Right.
Because what the hell do I know?
If people come to you, though, from, say, family and they're going through a struggle, do you go through experience rather than advice?
Yeah, I mean, I make suggestions.
Yes.
There's a key thing here.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, there are some approaches to therapy are very non-interventionist, okay? And they're just going to sit and listen. And I've worked with clients who've experienced that, and that's not always what suits them. Some people can be great. They just want someone to sound off to. The old psychodynamic approach is something called the tabula rasa, which is the blank slate. and the therapist there would just sit and take notes and let the free association of the client maybe bring things out. Don't think people want that. They're not the people who approach me at any rate. And I might make suggestions, but I could be wrong. And it's up to them what they do with it. So with regard to family, yeah, we can talk about things, but often it's about how people think about things more than anything else. So if you want to improve your relationships, improve yourself.
Yes, every time. Any part of your life.
Yeah.
You just constantly look in. What is it about me that I'm experiencing, really? Because when you're projecting out onto other people, they're doing this, they're doing that. Yeah, but they did that. What is it within you, though, that's hitting a wall with this?
Yeah.
And why can't you change your direction towards it and your way of dealing with that situation?
Yeah, I mean, there's one group of clients that I probably can't work with, and that's people who are very narcissistic, typically men.
Yeah.
The typical example of this is going to be some guy that rocks up. He's come because his wife has asked him to told him he must get therapy. And what he wants from me is to give him some magic formula to sort his wife out.
It's just funny because men are dicks sometimes, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. What do you mean sometimes? Yeah.
Sometimes.
All the time.
Yeah.
But, and my answer is, let's talk about you. And after a couple of sessions, they don't come back. Because they are not the problem.
Yeah.
Well, you are, we're always the problem in a way, because if it's not what we're doing or how we are, it's how we're thinking about it.
So there's it's kind of nuanced, but I sort of thought of an answer in my head, but I want you to go. What about when you're dealing with that wife though, and you think, they'll get annoyed at hearing what my problems are through me, but I've got a narcissistic husband or abusive husband or somebody that's built me into this spot, but is it still for them to inward search and go, yeah, but why are you in this situation?
Well, in as much as if they're the person in front of me, they're the only person I can have any effect on.
Yes.
And sometimes that might be questioning, are they in the right relationship? Sometimes it's about transitioning into couples work, because I do couples work as well. And that might be more appropriate.
I've got a few... I love this conversation because there's so many questions. Let's go to this one, and you really helped spark that. Men and women.
Mm-hmm.
Is it important to look at the differences and look at the difference literally of the chemicals in our bodies, how we operate, how we think? Is it cat and dog?
No, it isn't.
It isn't. Very, very similar.
How can I work with clients on an empathic basis who are not the same gender as myself, or cultural background, or age? So, I work with people from age 16 up into their 80s, and we can relate. Work with people who are any kind of gender assignment you want, and we can relate. They tell me who they are, and we're humans together. Yes, of course there are differences, but what makes us human is greater than what separates us. And I find that people have similar anxieties. There might be different things triggering it, but they're expressed in a similar way. And okay, there are certainly cultural effects. So, in my experience, that it's life is tougher for women because it's not necessarily confidence is the wrong thing, but society puts a different expectation on them. They might have grown up in an environment where the girls going to nursery would be given nurses' uniforms and the boys would be given doctors' coats. That research has been done where mothers had their babies were given a task to crawl up a slope and asked to assess how well the baby would do. Consistently assessed that the boys would do better than the girls, and they don't. But there's that basic assumption there, which is kind of shared by women as well because of the culture I think that they've grown up in, which denigrates women, has done for years. It's less so now, but it's still there a lot of the time.
Is it that when you say there are differences, though, is it important to take them into account in your practice? For example, I did a podcast recently with a woman about menopause, and I had no clue, vision as a man. And there is no education there about menopause. And she was so angry by the system for this because when it was happening, it destroyed her marriage. It destroyed so many elements of her life. Even her children looked at her in a different way from it. She got the hormone replacement therapy, completely changed her life around because of this. But she even said to me, I had the male testosterone, and now I get your horny bastards. Because that was all she felt. So she went, oh, that's what you were going through.
Yeah.
I'd lived a biological life as a woman, thinking I was horny, and then I went and had male testosterone, and now I see what horny means. So that was an interesting thought where I was like, okay, well that's helpful. That you've had a male testosterone and thought in a different way.
Yeah, well, you know, the women have been denigrated for a long time about, oh, you know, she's on a period now, or it's the menopause, and oh, you know, it's just hormonal behaviour, without anybody talking about the damage that testosterone has done. Terrible male behaviour driven by testosterone.
Yeah.
You know how many women are killed in this country? Each month, numbers of women are killed. Worry about getting abducted on the streets. It's the people they live with, the men they live with, are most dangerous, statistically speaking. And it's testosterone that's doing that.
And, you know, then you never excuse it by going, well, men have more testosterone, so they want to fight, they want to kill, they want to have sex.
Yeah.
But how do you balance that in understanding it to overcome it?
Well, again, it's about asking people how it feels. So not making the assumption that, you know, because someone's on the menopause that they're going to be a particular way. I want to ask them how they feel about it and talk through that. So they can have, we all get this. We get strong emotional responses to things, but it's not necessarily a response to the situation in front of us. It's either it may be a hormone that's doing it, or it might be part of our history. It's reminding us something in the past and triggering some memory. And so it's about asking questions about, okay, what's really going on for me here? What does the evidence show? How likely is that to happen? What's the worst that can happen? You know, they're good questions to ask.
Remind me some of those questions, good ones to ask.
Well, how likely is the thing that I fear to happen?
Yeah.
What's the evidence show? What's the worst that can happen?
They are good questions to ask.
And what's really going on for me here? That's a central one to it. It's like, well, I'm anxious in this situation. Okay, what's this about? And oh, I know. It reminds me of that time at school when that teacher humiliated me in front of the class. I stood up to read a passage and there's a word that I couldn't pronounce. And now I'm struggling with the public speaking because it reminds me of that occasion.
You've hit a snag in me there. I just remembered about that. Yeah, that was a horrible task to do at school. Everybody has to read a certain part, and then because I'd been labelled from primary school, you're dyslexic, I'd succumb to, oh, I can't read. So then when the teacher sort of bullied me, in essence, of every time we had a reading task, this will help him. If I just make him constantly do it, he's only going to get better. Yeah. But there was a time, I must have been in year 8 or 9. I didn't get myself through school eventually. But it was the history teacher, and I threw the book at him, I threw a table over, and then started trying to smash a wall. Yeah.
Yeah, so, because that's avoiding the shame, and that translates into anger, and you have a feeling that's too powerful to contain, and it bursts out, and it's like a flamethrower blasting everything in front of you.
Wow.
You know, people with dyslexia often find that they develop a personality of hiding away, of avoiding these situations that might lead to humiliation. But at the same time, it can be a really real spur. Some of my economically most successful clients have had quite severe dyslexia, and it's a desire, fuels a desire in a way to prove themselves in the world.
We'll go to labels. In this podcast, there's been a bit of discussion of if they're healthy or not. Where is your take on it?
They can help.
Yeah.
Some of them, like PTSD, is one that really helps. You know, for people to be able to say, "Oh, yeah, I'm not going mad. Then this is a thing."
Yeah.
That's where it can be really helpful. To admit that someone has got depression, given that that is a whole spectrum of things, can be helpful. Okay, then how can we work about that? So accepting a problem, but at the same time, labels can be really unhelpful. So I worked with a client for some time who'd got quite severe schizophrenia. Now, therapy can't help or can't cure schizophrenia. Probably nothing can. Drugs can help. But the thing is, having the schizophrenia, every problem in life was being labelled as being caused by that. So, okay, you're feeling a bit paranoid at the moment. Oh, that's because of schizophrenia. Well, no, that's because human beings often feel paranoid in these situations. And the progress I made with that client, who then was able to move on to have a full-time job and functioning in society well, was about not everything is about the schizophrenia. So you described yourself earlier about being dyslexic. Well, I wouldn't want to use that word. I want to say you have dyslexia because it becomes one-dimensional. You know, a schizophrenic is different from someone who has schizophrenia. A dyslexic
attached to it.
Yeah, is that that's all they are.
Yes.
And it's not. It's just one aspect of self.
And then you can find a healthy way of seeing dyslexia on its own too. You could see it as this sort of fearful base. Oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. Or what can it do for you? Could you see it as a superpower?
Yeah.
Does it make you think of things differently? Are you very creative? Does it open up doors for you?
Yeah.
And even with those labels that we attach to ourselves, separating ourselves from them and then turning them into superpowers is quite powerful. I've found throughout the time. Do you then try and steer away from clients using labels?
Not necessarily.
No.
Again, it's I'm gonna sound really wishy-washy here.
No,
it's
not
just,
at all. I get exactly what you're saying.
It's just whatever works for them. I'm trying to come at it from the point of view of I don't know anything.
It's really, I fully understand what you're saying when you say that. It's nothing you said's wishy-washy.
Yeah, and if it helps a label, then let's use that.
Everything you've said's made total sense in all its order, because you're just trying to help guide them and be that voice of either reason, either rationale, or turn on and question. But it's for them to search inside and find their own way with it. Was you've done it for 15 plus years, counselling. Was there a certain client, not to disclose anything, but was there somebody ever that you were working with that you were stumped with, and then when you found out how to work with that person, it opened up a new part of your, this is what I can start doing now? Have you changed through time in your practice?
I think it's constantly changing. I feel I learn from every client that I have. But I guess the arc has been doing less.
Always doing less.
Yeah.
Letting them discover.
When you do the original training, it's all about, and it's necessary because you want people to be able to work safely. So there are certain constraints on how you should work and exhibiting skills like, summarizing things and mirroring body language and just showing that, well, actually just show it, just be it. That's the thing. I've talked to you before about the authenticity. It's not about showing that you're authentic. It's just being authentic. Because you can't fake it.
Yeah. Comes across very quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah. There's the old gag, it's all about sincerity, because if you can fake that, you've got it made.
I bet you've got all the old gags in, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, I'm an old bloke.
What about with the clients that you've been working with for so long? Is there a balance of being reliant on you? Because surely there's only so much energy and time that you can give. How do you find that fine-tuning of, no, this is the cut-off point and this is what my boundaries are and what I need?
Well, again, it's part of the respecting what the clients want, is that I mean, it's exceptional for that length of time. I recently finished with a client after 5 sessions, and that did what they needed to do. It's not up to me to tell them I'm done with you now.
Right.
It's just if it still works for them. Basically, it's over when you're talking about the weather. You know, when you feel you've had, a few sessions and you're not really talking about anything psychological.
But you still would tell them it's over or not?
Well, no, it's something I'd raise, Hey, how do you feel about this? Do you feel
I see.
know?
Because sometimes they just feel, well, I don't want to lose you because you've been such a powerful part of my life and big energy towards it. I don't feel I can live on without you, quote unquote.
But I think that tends to not be the case, because part of the arc that we've been in is their self-realisation.
Yeah. And that is probably an end discovery, is I don't really need anybody to operate.
Yeah. And for some clients, it's okay. We'll have a sessions and then a gap, and they might come back again when something's happened in life.
But you as a counsellor, do you still, because we're flawed humans, when you're dealing with so many arrays of problems or dysfunctions and so on, can you detach quite well then to when you go home and you want to game with Owen or be with the family and how you are? Have you managed to switch off?
Yeah.
You can. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's the very first client I had when I was on placement had been abused multiple times, and on an almost daily basis. And think, welcome to the game. And that changed things. I remember driving home from the first time I'd been told by a client who'd suffered abuse, driving past a school. How many of those kids here are going through that? And there's a kind of loss of innocence to encountering that, of realising the world can be a terrible place for some people. And at the same time realising that my own life has been very far from terrible. That there's a positive thing that you get from dealing with clients who are going through stuff, is that my life's not so bad. And the fact that I feel that I believe I can help them, means that I can sort of contain that pain. I almost see it like circling around a whirlpool of pain, but not diving into it. Okay. So I'm as close as I can be, but feel safe. And it's about separating my stuff from their stuff. I have supervision on a regular basis. I've been using the same supervisor for 16, 17 years now.
Nice.
And we've got a long relationship now. And we don't often talk about clients very much, but just peripherally. We'll just talk about therapy in general or life in general. So that's kind of like my ongoing, it's partly therapy, partly supervision. It is a requirement that if you're in this business to have regular supervision. And sometimes there's a client that something's come up that I feel I need to talk about. I mean, once or twice I've traumatised him without any preparation, telling him something absolutely terrible I've been told. Oh, wow. And he's been going, whoa, hang on a minute. I'm sorry, I should have given you a bit of warning there about what I was going to say.
So the nurturing nature, and does that pop up quite a lot in discussion? Because imagining you're born this supercomputer, you're being constantly programmed with stuff, filled in by the communities, you've got very close circles or maybe not, and then further and broadens out.
Yeah.
Is there a genetic part to play as well? Sort of, what was Hitler? Did he just have bad people around him, or was he always destined to be in that certain way? Not that you know Hitler, but that sort of feeds the question.
He was kind to children and animals, but he wasn't all bad.
Yeah, yeah. No. Don't worry, I won't snip that bit out, but I know where you're at.
I'm not making case for him, but there are, again, there are reasons why people get to be where they are. So there are really no evil people.
Do you believe that? Is that?
Yeah, there are people who do evil things or good things or indifferent things.
There's not a predisposition in any part of our brains that can be born to be bad, quote unquote.
All babies are innocent, aren't they? And that's what, dealing with, if you like, difficult behaviours. It's look back to, where does it all start from?
I've told this story once before, but I did quite a lot of travelling, and I just need to say this in this part because it was my biggest teaching moment on my own accord, and I lived in South Africa for a year. I lived in Pretoria predominantly, but then I started just going up and down the coast. And I went to a really small town, tiny place, but they had an art exhibition on, but it was interactive in the whole of the town. And this is sort of my argument when they were dragging down statues of recent. I said about this story because it gave me my biggest lesson. And in this small town in South Africa, there were statues being put up for a period of time, but there was Nelson Mandela, and then as I started walking around, Adolf Hitler, and I was like, I don't know if I like this town anymore. I'm getting a bit nervous. And then Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Stalin, the huge figures of time, and they were all over the place. But as I started looking around, they're actually all facing one another, and they're all having a stare off. So I thought I'd go and have a look into them, and each plaque said the exact same thing on it, and it said the line between good and evil runs through every human heart. And then as they were all, Hitler was staring down Martin Luther King, and they're all just in this moment together. The line between good and evil runs through every human heart, and that was like, wow, that's powerful.
Yeah, so if somebody's behaving in a particular way, is thinking, well, what might lead me to that?
So really, you believe it's nurture?
Well, no, not necessarily.
Okay.
It's unpickable. So you get really complex behaviours in the animal world. An example I like to use is the cuckoo. That a cuckoo, it finds itself, when it comes out of the egg, in the nest of a different species of bird. If there are other nestlings in there that bird's had, he might kick them out so it can have the best time. And then when it comes to mate, it will not go and look for that bird that's parented it. It will go and look for another cuckoo. And then, they'll lay an egg in another bird's nest. But that cannot have been taught. It's really complex behaviour. Genetically programmed. So how many of our behaviours are genetically programmed? It's kind of unknowable because we labour under this illusion of free will some of the time. So it's a question I kind of leave begging because it's unanswerable.
Impossible.
Yeah. But nurture certainly has an effect. So
yes,
that children who are badly treated, are going to struggle in some ways, and sometimes that's going to result in them badly treating others.
You give me a really nice moment there. I thought about the nurture and nature question, but yeah, in terms of nature and human nature, so hard to pick apart that, especially to the complex place that we're at now and how we think. To just look at the innocence of a baby and watch it grow without being programmed in some way or form, you can't find that answer, can you?
No, you can't. And sometimes, major events that are not inside parents' controls can have effect. And we don't know, that often you have clients that will talk about some seminal event in their childhood and none of the parents or family can remember it, but it meant a lot to them.
It's a huge one to me, and again, it was in that same period of 6 weeks or younger. Had quite a traumatic birth that I didn't know about. But there was a girl at this therapy course we're on, and she mentioned we had to do a task on what people might think of us, and she put chubby or chunky, and it was just an impulsive reaction for everybody there. All laughed. They didn't mean to, but they were like, "You, what?" But then I turned it on to myself somehow, so I took that, but fat has always been a huge thing in my life because I was bullied heavily from it and built up a really bad resentment towards the word and the term fat. But then I sort of just left it there. It must be from when I was bullied. That's it. Fat, bad. There you go. But actually, when I was talking about it, I was saying, yeah, but isn't it good to have a feeling so you want to be healthy though? And I kept mentioning health. I was like, what about health? And if I just eat, I won't be healthy. It's like, why do you keep mentioning health? And then as I took that, I was like, oh, why do I want to be healthy so bad? So I jumped from there, and I looked on my timeline, and I'd not really had much in the very, very small period. So I went home and I said, Mum, was I ill as a kid or anything? Did I have a traumatic birth or anything there? She's like, yeah. I had an appendicitis when I was only a month old or so, and I was in the hospital attached to drips and so on for a few weeks and so on, and I was always being sick.
Yeah.
And it's honestly, I was always going to the gym and looking in the mirror and seeing myself with a bit of chunk or whatever. But now, just from that moment where I've healed a part of myself there, looking back at it, oh, that makes sense why I had such a fear base from it. My perception of myself's changed. I don't feel worried about how I look at all. I go to a new gym now, which got a little spa to it, and I look in the mirror, and I just have a glance like, I'm fine, and walk on. And it was, instead of just going from this bullying element, I went even further back in the timeline and further back. And when I rummaged in there, that was a powerful truth that helped me change my thinking. So sometimes it's get to where you need to go.
Yeah, and it's all about the only place is now.
Yes.
Yeah, we want to think about the future a bit, but not too much because it's all going to end the same place. You know, a client recently was quite helped by a throwaway remark I made at the end of the session, and I say, well, why worry? We're all going to die anyway. And that really, really helped her over a subsequent week. You know, when she's feeling down about stuff, well, it doesn't matter. None of it matters. We're all going to die.
Is that one that helps you?
Sometimes, or sometimes, you know, well, I've got to die of something. That, you know, life is short. But I say I like to think about that. You know, look, today will be a good day to die. I'm enjoying this right now. If I go right now, I'll be okay. I've got to go sometime.
Yeah.
Acceptance of it, you know, that's the key.
Is that something that, because that's something we all share, is life and death, and everything in between is a bit of a dance, but the death factor, is that one that you eventually with all clients get down to? Is there a fear towards
well, it becomes part of it, you know. I think
Yeah.
it's something to talk about because it's something we avoid in our modern society.
I heard a rap song recently. I listen to jazz rap though, and there's always conscious lyricism. But somebody, I can't remember it to the exact, but it was, how much can a man alive teach me about death? And that sort of sunk in with me. I thought, oh yeah, they're just trying to extrapolate and take from the ancients and the philosophers, but how much can they teach you? And that hit me quite hard. I thought about that. So how do you sort of prep somebody and educate somebody towards that part? And
It's death outrageous, isn't it? It's absolutely outrageous. Look, the world's going to get by without me. No, I'm not going to find the end of the story. It's outrageous. People go and see a doctor and they might get a diagnosis. What? I'm going to die? Well, yeah, you always were.
yeah.
But until we get that, you know, moment, unless you just fall off the perch spontaneously sometimes, you know, people not engaging with it.
For some of the conversations you've had, not even with clients, but friends, and when it comes to death, which I've not had massive conversations towards, but I knew I really feared it, and now I'm coming to a light of, no, it's really helped having a daughter, actually. that sort of sets things for you, doesn't it?
It's continuity.
Oh, I don't have to think of me anymore. Feed it into, yeah, I do have to think of me. But with death, what are some of the feelings that emerge? Is it either the unknown? Is it the pain? It might be a really painful experience to go through. How will my body know what to do at the time?
Well, all of the above and more, I think.
Yeah.
But I think it's just the ending. I had, you know, big problems with death anxiety, which largely dispersed when I reached the age of 60, because I never expected to. So it all feels like a bonus now.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, you know, my father died when he was 55, and I thought getting near that age was difficult. I thought, I can't live longer than my dad. and when I went past that, I thought, wow, there is life.
Everything's just on top from here. That's really good. I like that.
And it feels weird now to be 8 years older than my father ever was.
Right.
It's just, it's an unknown world.
But is that an element that is hard to help people prep towards?
Well, again, it's not necessarily about prepping towards it unless somebody is facing it imminently. But I think it's that how to live authentically is using it as one of those existential givens, okay? So we are mortal. Okay, so how am I going to use that positively? And that is to value today. So I sometimes use the image of just imagine that all the money you were ever going to have was put in one box of treasure. But you couldn't open it up. You had to feel inside it. And you never knew when the last coin was coming out.
Huh.
Would you spend it more wisely, do you think? Because you could never earn any more.
Definitely.
And life's a little bit like that. We make this assumption we're going to live to this age or that age, but you never know. You just never know. So today,
it's a good settler, isn't it?
Today is important. And then the other givens there about isolation, we're each trapped within the confines of our own skull. How much can we really know someone else? But those moments when we can really connect with someone, when we can transcend that, when we can bridge that gap, then how much more value does that have? And then that feeds to the meaninglessness of life. Well, there's real meaning in that, isn't it, when we connect with someone else? And the choices that we make can affect all that. So you see those four givens, they all work together in a way. And it allows us to get more out of life.
And that's what we want.
Yeah, because if you can make life feel better, then why wouldn't you?
Yes.
It's a simple question. If you can feel better about stuff, why wouldn't you? So optimism is not that life's all going to be good. It isn't. Optimism, sustainable optimism, is I'll get through it. That whatever life throws at me, I'm going to get through it. And that's one thing about being ancient as I am now teaches, that you get through shit.
Yeah. Because again, that's sort of saying age is just a number. There's balance in that. What age does give you is more time on the planet to have more experiences. And if you're somebody that's wise to learn from experiences, thus you're going to have more wisdom eventually from those experiences you've had.
Yeah, but age doesn't necessarily grant wisdom. So someone might just learn bitterness and isolation from time.
Exactly. So they're not lessons being learnt, though.
Yeah.
So they're just living through.
Yeah. But often I find, with younger people, let's say, people in their teens, they can have this thing that my life is now ruined. And the thing I try and convey there, that life's a longer game. And there's always time for the game to turn around. I didn't really figure out what I wanted to do with my life until I was in my 40s. There've been things I've been doing, but I didn't find out what was really important until I was in my 40s. And the other thing with younger people, they're used to change, so they're often easier to fix. And are more open to change. I've got a lot of faith in young people. I think they get a lot of bad press.
We're dicks.
I'm not. You're not a young person.
Yeah, 27.
Yeah. Getting old man.
Oh
now.
God, ouch.
No, but I think about the teenagers, people up to 21 and below. They're great in whatever my experience of them.
Yes.
And people talk about snowflakes and wokeness and stuff like that. Well, okay, maybe things go a bit far sometimes and people get a bit over-enthusiastic. But the idea of trying to be nicer to people is not a bad one, is it?
No, that's how I've seen that movement, quote unquote, is it's all generated from a nice place, a good part of the hearts. I've seen it again deployed or showcased in a really toxic side of natures. Yeah. Which can happen to anybody. When I'm trying to, with my partner, I love you, but then I'm being angry towards it, coming from a real loving place, but I'm not learnt to channel these parts of my emotions. Yeah, I have now.
And struggling to accept others can be a problem, and people also look for simple answers to complex problems.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are no answers. Sometimes, the least worst is our best option. Sometimes in relationships, the only choice we've got is to not make things worse, because we can't make things better if the person that we're with is really struggling with something.
I suppose the thing with the woke and the snowflake one is we had this discussion just before the podcast started, I think, but it's where we need to be right and there's no other option. And it's this absolute black and white. And I said to you, I listened to a podcast recently, and it was that start trying to wear your opinions like your clothes rather than your skin. And if you can open up and listen to the truth in what somebody's saying, there might not be such a vehement virtue signalling approach to it. And it's, listen, Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, whoever, I hear what you're saying, I see what you're trying to conduct, but I don't think it's helpful. And they could do it in that sort of manner, whereas they're like, no, I am this team, you are that team, we must attack. And that's where I feel it's gone a little bit south and sour.
Yeah, I mean, a scientific approach to thinking is quite useful. The idea that there is no absolute truth that we know, we've just got the best approximation of it at the moment. And that science advances by disproving things, not by proving things. It's where the facts no longer fit the theory. That's when you make advances. And we should be open to doing that, testing our thoughts and our beliefs. Hang on, I had a strong Christian belief in the past, and that it became unsustainable. But a lot of that was based experientially on some very powerful spiritual experiences I had. And I said at the time that either it was true or I was delusional. And it was quite hard to come to the conclusion that I was delusional. Because I was very good at arguing for it, and with myself.
Yeah.
But it was a particular place I was in at the time. I was struggling, really vulnerable. It gave me some support. I don't want to argue anyone else out of it because I envy it. I kind of miss it.
Yeah.
But I couldn't sustain it. And shifting that belief is quite a hard thing to do, to say, hang on, that thing which I was really keen for, and I'm an intelligent bloke, I believe, and I can argue for stuff, and I was completely wrong. It's quite a hard thing to say.
But it's nice when you've indoctrinated yourself with a belief pattern or a belief system to find different ways of expressing it. And when you're in groups of people, to articulate it and be sort of propped up as this voice, it feels nice, doesn't it, to you? So it's the ego sort of inflaming and, I found a thing. And then I can understand why people hold on to that thing then, because it's so exciting when you're meeting new people to say your little spiel that you know you can do really well.
Yeah, and you gain status from it.
Yes.
You're a member of the group, you're a member, and initiate, you have the truth together.
And I think, there's small little pockets of society now that you see propping up. Is I've learned a thing to say. I had it when I lived in Australia as well. I worked for a charity, and they just give you a script, and this is how we talk to people. Like, how contrived is that? But eventually, after you get the idea of it, you can spout it, and it doesn't feel quite authentic, but it feels exciting. I know how to play with this now and manipulate, in essence, somebody in front of me. And that's what people often are trying to do, is just manipulate them to think the way you think.
Yeah. But how about, we move towards a world where we're just letting people be themselves.
Yeah.
Being okay with that.
That's the best way for me to that is any conversations I'm trying to have at the moment. I find it very interesting imagining or thinking and building stories of this is how they may think, but I'm not attached to any of it. It's just an interest. But when I'm with people, I'm just like, isn't this beautiful? We're conducting a wild process conversation. It's just amazing.
Yeah, sharing a moment.
Sharing a moment.
Yeah.
I feel that's what we've done today.
Yeah.
I've loved this moment as well. Just out of a thought from that, and you mentioned young people now, you've been in your role counselling 15 years. Is it a different kettle of fish, beast that's operating now through such strange times? the COVID world, the lockdown, we're all living in sort of this consistent way for 15 plus years of what you've been doing. Are you having different problems come through the door?
Ultimately, not really. I think COVID was challenging for people in different ways, but for some people it was quite pleasant. They quite enjoyed hiding away.
Yeah.
So to make an assumption it was difficult for everyone would be wrong. But for some people, certainly those living on their own, it was really hard.
Yes.
Really hard. Access to healthcare, relatives, fearful for the health of relatives, the death of relatives.
So maybe it just exposed things a little more, and the polarities. Either people are coming through with a really excitable, optimistic approach. Oh, I've been thinking this, been thinking that. But I've been forced to lock down, so it's given me time to think for what I actually want to do. I lost a job that I hated. Why not go for a job that I love? Because if I can lose that, then I can surely have a go at that.
Yeah.
And then it's brought the polarity of also, the darker side of what people are going through, but it's just exposed it a little more and made the discussions, I don't know how to explain that, but just made the discussions more impactful maybe.
I think the thing is that whatever's going on in the world, that people can struggle.
Yeah.
And often they're struggling because of what's happened in their history. So if someone's got an issue with alcohol or cocaine or something like that, I don't see that as being the issue. It's a symptom of the issue. And you've got to try and find what it is that someone's trying to escape from.
That's the saying that they use in Alcoholics Anonymous is drugs and alcohol are not the problem, they're the solution to the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. But, I don't necessarily agree entirely with their approach of that people have no control.
That is literally what I was alluding to earlier when I said what works, and that man doesn't drink now, which is fantastic because it was really damaging his life.
Yeah.
But when we're having a certain discussion, it become the doctrine and the only way. And then I thought, oh...
Yeah, and it's not right for everyone.
Yeah.
I used to have a problem with alcohol. I used to drink far too much. I probably wasn't an alcoholic, but I was pretty close to getting to be one. And had for health reasons and others, had an enforced stoppage for a while. I have a glass of wine now and again now, and it's in control. But the reason it's in control is because I believed I've sorted out the emotional background that was leading to the drinking in the first place.
Yeah, that's literally where I'm at. But for people that have completely shattered elements of their life to it and found a protocol.
It works, and I'm not knocking that. It's absolutely in favour of that, whatever works for them. And they might not have access to counselling, for instance.
Yes, yeah.
That it's one of the problems with counselling is the affordability. That people on low incomes don't have access to long-term therapy. I do sometimes do pro bono work, and if it feels like the right thing to do, but ultimately people have got to have the resources to pay for it, and it's difficult for those working on in the NHS sector that they might be able to offer 5 or 6 sessions, and they must have clients sometimes they feel that they need more, but they can't offer it, and it's difficult.
You're in a scene, the counselling scene. There's personal training scenes and whatever. Is it easy to become a counsellor?
No,
not at all. And are there sort of red flags for people? I'm just trying to, what the question's conducting towards is there's definitely, for personal trainers now, not that I am one, but I'm very good friends with many, and it is quite a saturated market because eventually you could pretty much go on Groupon, go on a course, here's my badge, come to me. And then there've been horrendous outcomes working with the wrong personal trainer. Yeah. Because they've just given, again, like we said earlier, this one-size-fits-all plan, this is what you do for that. And then for somebody that's got, because of past, a really bad relationship with food and vision towards it, then they've just starved themselves and close to death from it. And that was a personal trainer not thinking of the psyche and just all about we're getting the results though, let's get pictures, quick, snap, snap, snap. So it's really unhealthy and unwise, how do you find a good quote unquote counsellor?
It's hard because it's a sexually unregulated sector. People can call themselves a counsellor.
Can they?
Yeah. There was a move a few years back to make it sort of on a professional basis that you'd have to have qualifications to be able to use the protected term, but it never came up. There are ways of getting some sort of guarantee. So I'm a member of the British Associations of Counsellors and Psychotherapists, BACP, and they operate a register, which I'm on, for those who have demonstrated they've got the training and done whatever testing is required, and then we sign up to an ethical framework which we agree to adhere to, like having the supervision will be part of that. It's not a set of rules, it's a set of principles that people have to follow, like beneficence, always acting in the client's best interest, non-maleficence, not acting against the client's interest, autonomy, the things like that. And applying those principles is important. And it also gives somewhere for people to complain to, so you can get sanctioned, taken off the register and so on and so forth, lose the membership. But it's not, people aren't guaranteed to do that. It was 4 years training for me, including sort of 200 hours of supervised placement work before I did it, and a lot of personal work, personal therapy required. It's a tough process, and a lot of people dropped out of that process during it.
Wow.
And it's economically quite difficult to achieve. I was fortunate enough to get some help in doing that, but it can be very expensive. So it's not easy, and it's not for everyone. It's all down to, in the end, whether you can put your own stuff to one side and plug into someone else's.
The camera was going for about 2 and a bit hours. This is fantastic. Okay. But I've only allowed a certain amount of space on the platform that I upload to, so I do need to bring it to a wrap.
That'll do for me. Yeah.
But have you enjoyed it? Your first podcast?
Fun. Yeah.
I'm so happy I've met you. You're an awesome human. Would you ever do your own podcast, do you think?
I don't know. I've got anything to say.
I can tell you've got 2 and a bit hours, and I honestly feel for myself I could have done another 2 hours with you. I'm really excited to put this one out. It's going to be fantastic. Could you just let people know that still come to this point where they can find you and everything that you do if they would love to work with you?
Yeah, well, I've got my website, which is counsellingderby.co.uk.
I'll put it in the description.
That's the easiest point now, or email me at david.eames@sky.com.
Fantastic. So that's counsellingderby.co.uk and David Eames.
David.eames.
David.eames.
@sky.com.
I'm going to put that in the description.
Yeah.
I might be in touch. I'll do my bit. Guys, thank you for being here. You've been a part of the Old Farm Bus, Back of the Bus Sessions podcast. I'm going to leave you on this, and I always do, and I always will. Just be nice to one another, you beautiful set of buggers. That's all you've got to do for me. Peace and love.